I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Behind the Mic, Voices of the EPN. I am your host, Chris Nessie, founder of the Education Podcast Network, as we talk with Dr. Steve Miletto, host of Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Hopefully you've enjoyed all the episodes to date. Our last episode where we talked with Dr. Sam Fessage from the EduMagic Future Educator podcast. And I'm excited to bring in Steve. Welcome, Dr. Miletto.
Thanks so much, Chris. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad that, number one, and I've said this to every guest, I'm pretty sure so far, that number one, you create your podcast because what you're putting out, the world needs in the world of education. And I'm glad you're a part of the Education Podcast Network. So thank you for both of those things.
Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. It's fun. It's cool.
Podcasting should be fun. I've talked about that before as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things that takes time to do, but it is fun. It's cool. It's cool
and
stuff.
It is so worth it. That has come up before as well. But let's dive in, Steve. Can you share a little bit about your background in education and how it led you to podcasting and creating your content?
This is my 37th year in public education in the state of Georgia, and I was a history teacher in the beginning, and for a bunch of years, and then I became an assistant principal and did all that fun stuff that assistant principals do for a long time. I wore lots of many hats and lots of many. That's good. I wore many hats, and then I went on to become a principal. And while I was a principal, I went to places to make change and stuff like this. All right, and that's how I marketed myself. One of the things that happened along the way, towards the end of one of my my times at a school, I started listening to podcasts, and I was like, these are pretty cool. And I thought, yeah, this would be neat to do. But there's part of me that's like, I'm not sure that this is a good thing at the time, because I was worried about saying something that might, then the next thing I know is I got somebody from the district knocking on my door and saying, can we talk? Or something like this. And so I kind of put it off, and it'll be nice to do one of these podcasts, stuff like this, because I listened to a few of them. And as I moved up into the better phone and so forth, it all worked out. And I started getting encouraged by hearing other podcasts. And so what ends up happening is that there's enough time there that the technology starts becoming even easier to get. And, and so what happens is I end up, my time as a principal, I start looking for some other challenges and so forth. And I end up as what's known as a RESA director in Georgia. So I'd been a high school principal in 3 different places where I'd been focused on change and improving what was going on. And RESA, all in the state of Georgia, all public schools are required by law to belong to RESA. They're regional educational service agencies. There's 16 of us in the state. And so it was there that I realized, okay, not as a principal now. Now I have this different type of community. My board is made up of school system superintendents, and I have this team, and we address we figure out ways to serve and support the school systems we work with. I suddenly realized this is going to work well, I think, for me to start now to try and figure out how to podcast. And that's how it started. And in the beginning, I got to tell you, that was a trip. And it still is kind of a trip, but it's much better, positive.
We will certainly talk about the bumps and the curves that she experienced. Steve, what was the inspiration behind what you wanted to podcast about?
The biggest part of it was I wanted to do something to help school teachers and building administrators. That was my focus. I was like, there's got to be some way, or if nothing else. And, it's this whole idea about providing resources came to my mind. And that's really what my statement is about my podcast now, providing resources for school administrators and classroom teachers, and that's how it fits well. So that's what I've been focused on. And that's what came to mind right off the bat. I started doing that. Although the way it started is a lot different than the way it is now, primarily because in the beginning, I'm like, so do I write a script? Do I, read from the script? How do I do this? And in the beginning, I also had a I didn't have a microphone yet. I was using a handheld recorder, and which picked up every sound in the room. So it's a little rough in the beginning, and but I also at that time there were a lot of people who were professed to be experts in podcasts who wanted to sell you like their podcasting kits, and only $1,500 here or $2,000 there, and I'm like, yeah, no. So I started listening. I started listening to other podcasts and trying to find ones where people were doing it, as in an inexpensive way. And I found people who were buying USB mics, and I actually in the beginning started off with a interface and a XLR mic plugged into it and did it that way. And then eventually I actually bought another type of mic, the USB mic, and kind of messed around with those things for a little bit.
Yeah, it can take time for a podcaster to, find their sound and, really kind of find their voice, which I got to say, you have done a phenomenal job at, because you produce a well put together piece of audio. So again, for people who are not listening to your podcast yet, there's a couple places that you need to go and check out. One, you can go to edupodcastnetwork.com. And again, Steve is the host of Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. But the best place you can go is right to Steve's website, which is stephenmoletto.com. And there'll be a link to both of those in the app you're listening right now, which are a swipe or a tap away. But you've got to go and check it out because, and Steve, we're going to talk about it right now. As we're recording this, you are on the doorstep of 600 episodes of your podcast. Okay. And I want to repeat that. I know people can rewind it, but you're close to 600 episodes. And if you're listening to this when this first comes out in January of 2024, you're past 600. All right.
Yes.
But let's do where we are right now. What does it feel like to be almost at 600 episodes?
Oh, I'm geeky about this. This is cool. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, cause I'm about to be 100 past 500. And I remember back, I remember back in the day when it was like, I got to 10 and I was like, yeah, I'm at 10. All right. I've passed the magic number of 7 and, or infamous number of 7 or whatever the data is. It says, once you get past 7, and it's really cool. Cause I don't know if I ever saw this coming. And I remember having, weeks of going, what am I going to do this week? Actually the day of recording going, I wonder if this topic's going to be good or not. Right?
Yeah.
And now it's I can't be scheduled enough. Now it's a good problem to have. And what I mean by that is my organization skills. I have to really kind of, because sometimes I know I disappear from the world for a little bit because it's like I need a breather. All right, but yeah, this is cool. I'm getting close to 600, and it's really awesome. And right now I'm at 791,000 downloads, and so I'm getting closer. I'm inching towards 1 million, and that's what my goal is, is to see if I can get that, and then go from wherever that goes. So
the million that will happen for sure. Let's go back to the beginning. So you're almost at 600, or again, as you're probably past it at this point in real time. What were, and you kind of hinted at this a little bit a while ago, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you wanted to launch your podcast, and how did you overcome them?
Well, first of all, I'm not shy of a microphone, all right, but it was trying to understand the technology that I needed, because I was listening. I could listen to them fine, and as I learned more, and I learned from a bunch of teachers that I knew that had different favorite podcasts. Now, I didn't keep listening to some of their podcasts, but there was, but it helped me a lot. I'm also a geeky guy who likes Spider-Man and Batman and some stuff like that. And so I discovered there's this whole world of funny, literally, two guys in a garage talking about whatever geeky thing they're talking about. And, and that was a blast as I started expanding those boundaries a little bit. And so I started thinking, well, I know I want to do about teaching and school and administrators and stuff like this. And in those days, they were kind of suggesting that your title should pack as many words into it as you can.
Got to optimize it for SEO.
Exactly. So I did that thing. And, now today they're like, you don't really need to do that anymore. Well, it's too late, because now I got this really big mouthful, but it works for me because it's what it's about. we talk about teaching. I talk about, and teaching, we're talking about learning, and all of that means that we can use that to lead whatever we're doing K through 12. So, so I have a way of explaining that, but that's really where the name came from too.
And to your credit, again, so it's optimized for SEO, of course, but it doesn't sound keyword like you did it that way to like kind of game any type of system. Like
Thanks.
It flows.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Cause it does. And actually you can shorten it to make a nice little, TLLK, and, it's like little numbers for a radio station or something. But, but that was a challenge in the beginning, trying to figure out what it's going to be about. And like I said about should I write a script? I tried that at the beginning, discovered that when you write a script and you read a script, that you're over with in like 2 and 3 minutes. And you're going, wow, that was a short episode. And, I started realizing I just need to write some key points and just talk, because I can talk. And in the beginning, it was me talking about subjects. And then I started saying to myself, I think I need to invite some guests. And that's when I learned a new aspect of what I was doing, which is I tried writing just down some topics that we might talk about, and I'd share them with the guest. And I found out that sometimes guests don't really answer questions the way that you think they're going to. So you might end up with them saying things like, yes. Okay. How can I say this tactfully? Do you want to say some more? Can we figure this out? And so that's when I started creating guiding questions. And so now I work on providing a list of about 12 guiding questions to the guest, and we can change and move off the topic, I tell them, but it's really meant for me to redirect the conversation if it gets into the land of yes, no, or whatever. But that was one of the challenges. And like I talked about before, one the biggest ones was as I was trying to figure out equipment and how to do that. And when you want to interview people, then you want to add another mic and all that sort of stuff. And so over the years, it's really evolved across different equipment. I have my memorabilia shelf, whatever you want to call it, where, I remember I can date when I bought that one, and I bought that. And now, this is not, my podcast is not sponsored by them, but I use their equipment, and and I like it. I have a Rodecaster Pro, and I can hook up a bunch of mics to that and interview a bunch of people at the same time. And I think it's done a great job of helping me be able to deal with my sound without having to be a sound master or something like that, whatever you're going to call it. So,
I get it. I'm right with you. I'm the geeky stuff, the journey. Although, for me, it was very guest heavy at first with House of Ed Tech. And then in the last couple of years, it's been more, I got things I want to say. I don't need to lean on the guest. I'm more comfortable. I found my voice and got more comfortable wanting to put myself out there. And I'll go back to guests when the time is right. And I just, back in the summer of 2023, I'm trying to make this time current. I went through, 7 weeks of guests and conversations, from ISTE. So podcasts are, it's not set in stone, as you can probably agree with it. It's a recipe where you can change this, change that, and ultimately you come out with something a little different every time.
That's what's cool. That's and I'm starting to think about going back to doing some individual shows as well. And what I think is cool is we have our own show. It's like I always wanted to have a radio show and never really pursued that thought, but now I have my own talk show, thought show, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's pretty cool. And
I got to say, for the person who's listening, who just thought Steve sounds amazing, how was he never on the radio? And everybody I talk to, Steve, we play the bumpers at the beginning of our network shows. And I tell people all the time, I got to be fair to everybody else. But if I only had to play yours, you have a great voice. So I know everybody's thinking that who's listening, but let me just tell you that to your face.
Well, thank you.
Great voice.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is, and
if I didn't have everybody do their own bumpers, I would have asked you to do all the bumpers for everybody. So you would be the voice of the network, but there's something for everybody doing their own bumper.
You got that right. But thanks for thinking that. And by the way, if you ever think about doing that, I'd be happy to. So
good to know. It could be a little side hustle too.
There we go. I like that.
When did you start your podcast? So 600 episodes. When did the journey begin?
Fall of 2013. And
you beat me by a few months, although I'm nowhere near 600 episodes.
I was just listening to your show the other day when you were talking about when you started. I was like, oh my gosh, we weren't that far away from each other. And in the beginning, it was, I didn't have a constant schedule. I was just trying to, keep it going because I was listening to people talking about this thing called pod fading. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so I'm trying to figure out what a topic will be about. And I was interviewing some people to try and give me some more topics and doing this and that. And, and today I publish twice a week. And, in those days, it was pretty much like twice a month. And I was trying to get it down to once a week type thing. I actually tried 3 times a week.
Oh my goodness.
A couple of years ago. And I discovered I'm not doing that again. So that made it very much like work. But I've been able to get into this constant rhythm, which has been very helpful to some colleagues and so forth that have helped me be able to find good people to interview and topics that fit with what we're doing and made it fun. And I'm someone who I don't want to get caught in a rut. So I kind of reach out there so that I have you're going to find some different types of topics. I even bring writers on because I tell them, I say, and my favorite are like thriller authors, by the way, but I tell them, I said, in a program that's about that part of its audience is teachers, just educators. They all, one of the things that they have in common is they're readers and they like to escape. And so from time to time, and I said, so this is a good audience for you. So that's once they say, oh yeah, once they hear, oh yeah, that's right. Teachers would be readers. They're like, oh my gosh, we'll talk with you. We're good. And so then we talk about writing and the book. And then we talk about writing and stuff like that, because usually one of the other things about educators is we all might have a book in us or 2, 3 years
or more. Yeah. Well, since you brought up the fact that you have some diverse content, for the person who's listening who sadly isn't listening to your show right now, but they're going to go and check it out, let's say they don't want to go all the way back to episode 1. What is an episode or a couple of episodes that you would recommend they definitely go into your catalog and check out if they're going to become a new listener of your podcast?
All right. So I've had a neat assortment of from serious to fun and serious together, and some different things. For example, like I had this one gentleman who was finalist on the UK version of America. In our country, it's called America's Got Talent. So I guess it's, I don't know what
Britain's Got Talent. Okay. Yeah.
Something like that. And he was a finalist there, and he has puppets. All right. And he has these, and he's a ventriloquist. And so it was the coolest thing talking with him, because when he would do the voices of the other one, you'd swear that I was interviewing 2 people. All right. And it was really cool, especially because when I asked him if we could talk with his main character, and he said, sure. And he kind of moved around a little bit. So it sounded on the podcast, it sounds like the character, the other, somebody else is sliding their chair in next to the microphone or something like that. And that was a cool one. Another awesome one that's different from all the rest is I interviewed a magician right as COVID happened. His whole world went kablooey because he had all these school systems cancel. He was, they were his primary customers out in California. They did all these shows. He had like over 300 of them cancel as COVID was happening, and people were not wanting to get together. And so he's trying to figure out how to change his world. And so he figured out that he could do a podcast like he was a TV show or something like this. Well, he was a blast because he actually does a magic trick with me on the air on my show. And so you hear me and it's all, nothing's faked. He sent me a box ahead of time that said on it, he said, I'm going to send you this box. It says, do not open until the day we are recording. And, oh my gosh, that was so cool. Cause I open it up and he then proceeds to walk me through. Inside was a Stephen King novel that, it's like 1,000 and some odd pages. And it was an amazing trick. It was so cool. And it's all real my reactions are all real on there because I don't know how he did that. And I've had a number of other things. I just finished interviewing George Stevens Jr., his father was George Stevens, who is an acclaimed producer, director from the golden age of Hollywood, who one of his big movies was Shane and Giant. And, Giant is the movie that the last movie that James Dean did. He decided to go drive his sports car to go where he was going that night, and that was it. And George Stevens Jr. is the founder of the AFI to protect. I mean, he won lots of awards in TV and and movies as well. But one of his huge claims to fame is that he created the AFI to protect Hollywood classics so that they don't go away, and to recognize the stars of Hollywood who have, done tremendous things. Like one of his recognitions in the beginning of the AFI was James Cagney. And so just different sorts of topics, which is really cool. I have thriller offers. I have educators, I have teachers, I have principals, I have superintendents, and they're all a blast. So hopefully that kind of gives you a couple there to.
Definitely a good sense of that. And while Steve was talking, I was searching and prepping. So if you are in your podcast player, if you go a swipe or a tap, you can get to these episodes that he was talking about. The Magician was John Abrams. There'll be a link to that episode. George Stevens Jr. was episode 585 of Steve's podcast. So those episodes that he talked about are a swipe or a tap away. Go check them out. And I'm definitely going to go back and listen to the John Abrams one, because I want to hear those on-air magical reactions that you had, because I love magic. At my desk right here, I like playing card magic, so I've got cards down there. I collect decks of cards, so
cool.
I can relate. Am I good at it? No, but it's fun to try.
Nice. I've always been amazed by magic, and I have a crooked card deck, by the way. One of those that's crooked. They actually shaped it crooked. So from gag gifts to the type that every other card's like a 7 of hearts or something, and trying to do different things to figure out. But I've always been the annoying guy with the cards.
My family has described me as that as well.
Nice.
I'm the annoying uncle.
That's hilarious.
Steve, when you think about the podcast, what have you been able to learn as the host of your show that you've been able to take from guests, and what lessons have you learned that you've been able to put into practice in what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one of the coolest things is that, talking with just all kinds of people from everywhere, it's reminded me how, this is the cool thing. I've had podcast episodes where I'm interviewing somebody who's, for example, John Hattie, who's in a whole nother world. I've connected with educators who are in Australia, New Zealand now. And one time I was talking with somebody who was in France, who connected me with somebody who was in Finland. And, and it's like, it's just a cool sort of thing that you start making these connections with people from around the world. So let's talk about the United States for a minute. I've connected with people all over. We've never been in the same room together, but we've been in the same audio room together, the same Zoom room, and that's so awesome to be able to have those types of talks and such. And that's been a neat eye opener in and of itself, because you're connecting with people and you're talking with them. And so that's helped me reach out to people just to say other things, like in my work world, where they might be able to help me in whatever they're doing. It gives me a new resource of somebody to go back to. I think that's one of the coolest things about podcasting is that if you want it to be, you can create this fantastic network that you have, and people reach back out to you, and you can reach back out to them and say, hey, I was thinking this crazy thought. How about, and as a result of that, I've connected with Jeff Eichler, who has a podcast called Cultivating Curiosity. It's called Getting Unstuck, Cultivating Curiosity. And he and I have done some, what he calls 2 Men in the Park type episodes, where we read a book together or we have a topic. And recently we read the book Rocket Boys, and also known by its movie name, October Sky. And we talked about that together, and that's cool, because that's a neat, we become friends, and never been in the same room together. He's up in New York someplace, and I'm here. And
Jeff's podcast used to be on the network, but then his podcast kind of went in a little bit of a different direction. So
he's not focused on education anymore. Now he's focused on this idea of what curiosity is, and it's you and I, we've connected through this and through your network and all that sort of stuff. And it's, I think that's one of the coolest things about podcasting. I mean, it's so much more than just, and I'm going to say something here in just a second that hopefully that comes off well. But one of the things I like about podcasting is that it's like a pirate radio. The or the pirate cable TV network. Or
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I love it when there's independents that are doing their thing and they're making it happen, and wherever their support's coming from, as opposed to, some big producer who's got something going in Hollywood. Not to say anything about Hollywood. That's my point. My point is where, you have some stars today who they hire all kinds of other people to do it, and all they are is the voice. And I love the idea of connecting with people and such. And we have this, the pirate radio thing going. So
I love it. We're indie. We're independent for sure. And maybe one day we will be in the same place at the same time, and we'll get to, hug it out, have a meal, something. And, we'll certainly make that happen for sure.
That'll work. And I got to figure out how to do the ISTE thing where you guys are going to meet at a sandwich shop or something like that. So that's driving me nuts. I was like, I got to do that. That would be cool.
We'll get it done, whether it's Philly or do they ever do ISTE in Atlanta?
They have. It's been a long time. I was there.
Well, when it cycles back around, I'll see if I can make it work.
There you go. That would be cool.
I would love to. Steve, before we say goodbye again, I just want to remind you who is listening, you can go to edupodcastnetwork.com and you can find the podcast that Steve hosts, Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. But the better option, go to Steve's website, StephenMiletto.com. Subscribe to his podcast. Every episode he has talked about, I've been keeping up. You should be able to go check out these episodes and get a sampling of his show, and you will very quickly decide to subscribe and follow his podcast for sure. So swipe or a tap away, get to the show notes in this episode. Steve, before we say goodbye, what lessons have you learned that you could impart on either a fellow podcaster or a fellow educator? What advice would you like to impart on the listener?
Well, I think, first of all, I've got a couple things, and the first one goes like this. One is that it's fun, but it takes time. And, as you're doing it and having some sort of, as you start doing shows, your focus becomes clear as you start doing more shows and you start realizing the type of stuff you like to do. So that's number one. The second one was that I realized that with some people, I can just have like 3 topics and we can talk for hours. And with some guests, I can't do that because it will stop and it'll come to a dead stop. And you're like, oh my gosh. So I created guiding questions. And in the guiding questions, it also says, hey, thanks for wanting to be a guest. Here's some information about my podcast. If on the day of the podcast, something happens, here's my phone number. So you can text me or call me. And then it lists the questions and I've had pretty good luck out of that. I've had a lot of guests say that helps them understand and prepare. Another lesson I learned out of that, by the way, is that some people then think that they need to write down the answers and then read their answer. And it's like, that's not what it was meant for. It's meant to give us, fodder for going forward. But, and then another lesson that I learned is that I like to now this is not, by the way, I'm not implying anything when I say this. All right. So please don't. But one of the things I learned is that I like to, I used to always say something after the guest said something because I feel that need. If they say something nice, then I need to say something nice. If they say something nice again, then I say something nice. And then I realized, well, it's ending with my voice. And so, because it still ends with my voice because I do the closing and all that sort of stuff. But I let them have the last word so that when they say, so if I say my closing and say something like, hey, it's been great having you on my podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, sharing with us your book today and talking about, you get the point. And then they might come back and say, yeah, I've enjoyed it today. We talked about this and talked about that and had a great time. And that's where I'll end it, is what they say. And that was one of my other lessons that I learned, is that if you kind of let them end that, and then up pops the close, the outro and stuff like that. So no more talking. And those are a couple of lessons that I learned. And I do have to say this as one final thing. The coolest thing is that as you start doing this, I mean, having, being you is just, it's just being able to do that with a microphone and just be you. And, when you talk with people and, you hopefully, you don't know how many guests I've talked with that have anything to do with educational technology or technology. I say something about, hey, if we're going to talk about AI, is it real? And if it's real, do you know anything about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? And, and if they can have a talk with me about that, I'm in seventh heaven, man, because I'm going to talk about Eddie, the shipboard computer, and I'm going to talk about Marvin, the paranoid android. So anyway, still a geekiness there.
Steve, see, now I'm gonna say some stuff, and it's gonna seem like I'm getting the last word, but I will make sure that you get the last word on this episode. Again, I want to thank you for creating your podcast. I want to thank you for being a part of the Education Podcast Network. And again, you who is listening, if you've never listened to Teaching, Learning, Leading K12, when you're done with this, go and check it out. It is a wonderful listen. Plenty of episodes for you to explore. We've got some great recommendations in the show notes. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another edition of Behind the Mic. Steve, I hope you had fun doing this conversation, and I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, thanks, Chris. This has been a blast. Thanks so much. I've enjoyed this tremendously. This is great sharing, and I can't thank you enough for having the Education Podcast Network, the first, because it's connected me with all kinds of colleagues, which is really cool too. And there's nothing like it, and I greatly appreciate you doing that and having me on today to talk about my show. And they need to make sure they go out and listen and check out all the podcasts you got there. So good stuff. Thanks.